Okay, picture the world map in your head right now. You know, the one hanging in every classroom, the one you always see on the news. What if I told you that that very map is actually lying to you about where the world's real power is hiding? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are tearing down the hidden architecture of global power. From the invisible shields of deep-sea nuclear subs to the dangerous gambles of artificial economic miracles, we're going to look at how the world actually works behind the scenes.
Section 1. The Illusion of Geography. Let's kick things off with the biggest flaw in how we see the world. It turns out, our perception of a country's size and global importance has been totally engineered, and a lot of it was completely by accident.
Just look at the sheer scale of this deception. On the map we all know, Africa and Greenland look, roughly the same size, right? But here's the crazy reality. Africa is actually 14 times larger than Greenland. Seriously, you could take the entire United States, China, and most of Europe, drop them into Africa, and literally still have room to spare. So how did we get this so wrong? Well, back in 1569, a Belgian cartographer made the Mercator map purely to help sailors draw straight lines across oceans. To make that work, the map stretches everything out the farther you move away from the equator.
And that brings us to a really crucial point. Maps are absolutely not neutral. They completely shape what we think about the world. Because that Mercator projection became the default everywhere, it accidentally built this psychological hierarchy in our minds. Europe and North America look massive and dominant, while the global south looks minimized. This single 16th century sailing tool subtly changed how we view global resources, populations, and who holds the real geopolitical weight.
Moving on to Section 2, the ultimate deterrent. We're stepping away from paper maps and into the brutal reality of how modern borders are actually protected. Because let's face it, being big on a map means absolutely nothing if you don't have the ultimate invisible shield to defend it.
Trace this timeline with me. Back in 1945, the US tests the first bomb and thinks, great, we have a total monopoly on this. But Soviet spies were already deep inside the Manhattan Project. By 1949, the Soviet Union tested their own. Then the UK tests theirs in 1952, realizing they needed their own deterrent when the US stopped sharing secrets. China follows in 1964. It was this rapid, unstoppable domino effect fueled by pure espionage and the terrifying thought of being left completely defenseless.
That paranoia drove this extreme technology right into the hands of a very exclusive 10-member club, totally defying international treaties. You had France in 1960 demanding European sovereignty so they wouldn't have to rely on America. Israel in 67 building an unacknowledged deterrent just to survive. India testing the Smiling Buddha in 74, feeling squeezed between China and Pakistan. South Africa actually built 6 bombs in the 80s, but voluntarily dismantled them when apartheid ended, literally the only nation to ever do that. Then Pakistan responds to India in 98 to level the playing field, and North Korea joins in 2006 purely for regime survival.
But here's the thing you have to understand. True nuclear power isn't just a bunch of silos sitting on land. It's mutually assured destruction, or MAD. And the real backbone of this dangerous gamble is hidden deep underwater. The major nuclear players use these completely untrackable deep-sea submarines. They're designed to launch retaliatory strikes even if their entire home country has just been wiped off the map. It is a terrifying, almost sociopathic logic, but weirdly enough, it's exactly what has kept global superpowers from fighting directly for decades.
Section 3. Resources and Geographic Traps. So, we've talked about military muscle, but how does that stack up against economic power? Geography can either be your greatest launchpad or a brutal trap.
Let's compare two totally different geographic destinies, Norway and New Zealand. On paper, they look pretty similar. Both have absolutely stunning mountainous landscapes and relatively small populations. But Norway is swimming in hydropower, sits right next to massive European markets, and exports tons of oil and gas. New Zealand, though, is completely isolated down in the South Pacific. They rely heavily on agriculture and real estate. And as we'll see, that isolation leads to a completely different set of problems.
Now for Norway, geography is literally hitting the jackpot. They just recently found a mind-blowing 70 billion tons of underground phosphate rock. We need phosphate for fertilizers, solar panels, EV batteries, the whole shebang. At current prices, that single discovery is valued at about $24 trillion. To put that astronomical number into perspective, it essentially matches the value of all the remaining oil wealth in Saudi Arabia. Just incredible.
But you know what they say? Having wealth is one thing, keeping it is another. A lot of countries hit the jackpot and fall right into the resource curse, where sudden cash breeds massive corruption. Not Norway.
They use incredible institutional discipline as a shield. By law, they only allow themselves to spend 3% of their sovereign wealth returns every year. The rest is locked away, invested for future generations. That strict self-control is exactly why they've secured the fourth highest living standard on Earth.
On the flip side, let's look at New Zealand's geographic trap. It looks like a huge country on the map, but about 80% of it is practically empty. You've got 70% of everyone crammed onto the North Island, and half of those people are in just one city, Auckland. Those gorgeous southern mountains you see in the movies, they're mostly uninhabitable. Because usable land is so incredibly rare, housing has become the main economic obsession, creating some of the most insanely unaffordable real estate anywhere in the world.
And that geographic squeeze directly fuels what's known as the New Zealand exodus. It's a really tough cycle. The local market is simply too small to support a ton of high-end corporate or tech jobs. Meanwhile, an economy propped up by farming and wildly expensive housing totally prices young workers out. So what happens? All these ambitious, highly educated young professionals pack up and migrate to Australia, just a 3-hour flight away, for bigger industries and better pay. It's a literal first-world brain drain.
That brings us to Section 4, the cost of economic miracles. If your geography doesn't naturally hand you scale and resources, how do you get it? Well, let's look at how some nations artificially manufactured massive economic scale. Not through free market democracies, but through absolute control.
We have to neutrally examine this uncomfortable piece of history. Some of the greatest economic explosions in modern times were ruthlessly engineered by absolute rulers. Look at South Korea. In 1961, Park Chung-hee took over, forced local companies to meet brutal export targets, and essentially birthed megacorporations like Samsung and Hyundai. In Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew lured in massive foreign investment with an iron grip on zero-tolerance corruption. And in China, Deng Xiaoping rolled out market reforms that lifted an unbelievable 88% of the country out of extreme poverty.
The results of these gambles are just staggering. Take Singapore. In 1965, they were kicked out of Malaysia. They had zero army, zero natural resources. They didn't even have their own drinking water. Their GDP per person was a measly $516. Today, it's over $90,000. Lee Kuan Yew essentially ran the nation like a ruthless CEO. It proves that you can build an immense, world-class economic powerhouse entirely from scratch, using nothing but strict governance and hyper-efficiency.
Section 5. The geopolitical chessboard. Now, let's pull all this together. We are currently watching the old, globalized system unravel right before our eyes, and you can see it playing out clearly on the geopolitical chessboard.
Take the projected conflicts in the Middle East, like the tensions between Iran and Israel. It's not just a local fight. It's a massive, multi-layered proxy web. The U.S. backs Israel to keep a strategic foothold and secure trade routes. But look a little deeper. China is securing 90% of Iran's oil exports and pouring $400 billion into Iranian infrastructure. Russia is supplying 70% of Iran's weapons, trading for drones and tech while benefiting from distracted American forces. And the Arab states? They stay publicly neutral while privately balancing trade deals against fears of their own regime instability. It's a masterclass in superpower leverage. These proxy battles are the ultimate sign that globalization as we knew it is ending. That rule-based order from the West is shifting fast. We are moving toward highly fragmented, regionalized alliances. Countries aren't playing by one single global rulebook anymore. They are playing entirely for themselves.
And finally, Section 6, the New World Order. As the old system fractures, who exactly is holding the reins of power? Let's outline the new factions that are stepping up to control this emerging system.
There are basically 4 architects fighting to write the new rules of the future. First, you have global finance, which just wants borderless, automated money moving at lightning speed. Second, central institutions and banks, who are rushing to build digital currencies so they don't lose their power as gatekeepers. Third, sovereign states, who are now totally willing to accept economic pain, like tariffs or inflation, just to guarantee their own military and energy independence. And lastly, technology itself, increasingly replacing messy human agreements with cold, hard algorithms and digital enforcement. As we wrap this up, I want you to think about this quote. When a system changes, it doesn't change with a loud noise. It silently normalizes. Think about it. The map distortions we just accept, the deep-sea nukes we forget about, the artificially engineered economies we rely on, these massive, world-altering shifts happen gradually, right under our noses.
True power isn't just about having resources or armies. It's about recognizing these patterns before they become the new normal. Once you understand this architecture, the chaotic headlines on the news stop looking like random events. You start seeing them for what they really are, highly predictable moves on a giant global chessboard.
So, I'm going to leave you with this thought. As the old global order falls apart and regional powers carve out their territories, how will these unseen forces, the architects of finance, technology, and sovereign control, end up reshaping the economy, the jobs, and the security of your very own hometown? Really think about that. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time as we dig into another fascinating topic.